Welcome back to my channel. In my last video, we discussed patterns of evolution, including convergent, divergent, and parallel evolution. In this episode, we examine two additional patterns, coevolution and adaptive radiation. 1. Coevolution. Coevolution is the process by which two or more species reciprocally influence each other's evolution through close ecological interactions. When species interact consistently over long periods, such as predators and prey, parasites and hosts, or plants and their pollinators, natural selection in one species creates selective pressures on the other. As a result, adaptations in one lineage often lead to counter-adaptations in the other, producing a dynamic evolutionary feedback loop. Coevolution does not imply harmony. It can occur in both cooperative relationships, such as mutualism, and antagonistic arms race relationships. One common form of coevolution is mutualistic coevolution, where both species benefit and evolve traits that enhance the interaction. In North America, a well-studied example involves yucca plants and yucca moths. Yucca moths are the sole pollinators of yucca flowers. They actively collect pollen and deliberately place it on the stigma, ensuring seed production. In return, the moth lays its eggs in the flower, and the larvae feed on some of the developing seeds. The yucca has evolved floral traits that suit the moth's behavior, while the moth has evolved specialized mouthparts and behaviors for pollination. Each species depends heavily on the other, demonstrating tight coevolution. Coevolution can also take the form of antagonistic relationships, such as predator-prey or host-parasite interactions, often described as evolutionary arms races. In Australia, interactions between resistant predators and toxic prey provide a strong example of coevolution driven by predator-prey arms races. Several Australian snake lineages, such as keelback snakes and some species of red-bellied black snakes, have independently evolved physiological resistance to toxins produced by their prey. For example, cane toads, although a relatively recent arrival, produce potent bufatoxins that are lethal to most native predators. In regions where exposure has occurred over multiple generations, some snake populations show increased tolerance to these toxins through changes in toxin-binding proteins and sodium ion channels. Another example from Australia is the evolution of eucalyptus trees and insects, such as psyllids. Eucalyptus species have evolved chemical defenses by producing toxic oils and compounds to deter herbivory, while certain insects have evolved physiological mechanisms to tolerate or detoxify these chemicals. This reciprocal adaptation leads to escalating defenses and counter-defenses over evolutionary time. In New Zealand, coevolution is particularly striking because of the country's long geographic isolation and historically bird-dominated ecosystems. A classic example involves native flowering plants and bird pollinators, such as harakeke, the New Zealand flax, and tui and bellbirds. Harakeke flowers produce copious nectar and have structures suited to bird beaks, while the birds have evolved curved beaks and brush-tipped tongues that efficiently extract nectar and transfer pollen. Changes in bird populations can directly affect plant reproduction, reinforcing reciprocal selection. Another well-known New Zealand example is the interaction between mistletoe species and native birds, where flower opening and nectar availability are closely linked to bird visitation. Overall, coevolution highlights that evolution is not driven solely by the physical environment, but also by interactions among organisms. Through mutualism, antagonism, and complex ecological relationships, species act as powerful selective forces on one another. 2. Adaptive radiation. Adaptive radiation is a special case of divergent evolution, in which one ancestral species rapidly diversifies into many species, each adapted to a different ecological niche. This pattern usually occurs when organisms encounter new environments with abundant unoccupied niches, reduced competition, or following events such as colonization of islands or mass extinctions. Natural selection acts differently on populations exploiting different resources or habitats, leading to rapid divergence in morphology, behavior, and physiology. Adaptive radiation is therefore a powerful driver of biodiversity, especially in isolated or newly formed ecosystems. Darwin's finches are the classic example. In Australia, adaptive radiation is strongly linked to long-term isolation and unique environmental conditions. Marsupials provide a classic example. Descended from a common ancestor, Australian marsupials diversified into many ecological roles, typically occupied by placental mammals elsewhere. This radiation produced kangaroos and wallabies adapted for grazing, koalas specialized for feeding on eucalyptus leaves, carnivorous quolls, and burrowing wombats. Each species evolved traits suited to its niche, such as specialized dentition, locomotion, and digestive systems. Australia's reptiles, particularly skinks, also show adaptive radiation across deserts, forests, and alpine environments. In New Zealand, adaptive radiation is especially pronounced because of the country's extreme isolation and the historical absence of terrestrial mammals. Birds radiated extensively to fill niches that mammals occupy elsewhere. The extinct moa provide a clear example. From a single ancestral lineage, multiple moa species evolved, differing in size, feeding height, and habitat preference, ranging from lowland forests to alpine zones. Another example is the New Zealand weta, which diversified into giant tree, cave, and alpine forms, each adapted to distinct ecological conditions, temperatures, and lifestyles. Adaptive radiation can also be triggered by key innovations, traits that open up new ecological opportunities. Across continents, the evolution of specialized feeding structures, locomotion styles, or physiological adaptations often precedes rapid diversification. Overall, adaptive radiation demonstrates how quickly evolution can generate diversity when ecological opportunity arises. Thanks for watching this episode on Patterns of Evolution. See you soon with another video on evolution. Until then, happy learning.